Hello, my name is Andrew Hers, and this is the accompanying video for the PowerPoint presentation of my leadership interview for leadership and organizations taught by Dr. Castro. Please go to the next slide. Introduction. The subject of my interview is Alan Hers, Senior Vice President of Mortgage Operations and Assistant Treasurer for the Blue Green Corporation, which is headquartered here in Boca Raton. Mr. Hers has been with the Blue Green Corporation for 22 years, beginning his tenure with the company in 1992 and being named Director of Mortgage Operations in September of that year. Mr. Hers went on to be elected Vice President in 1993 and was later elected Senior Vice President in 2004. In 2007, he added responsibilities as the Assistant Treasurer. Prior to his arrival at Blue Green, Mr. Hers spent 10 years in various lending positions with AmeriFirst Federal Savings Bank, the most recent being the Division Vice President in Consumer Lending, which he left in 1992. Mr. Hers was educated at Florida International University, where he received a Bachelor of Business Administration in Finance and a Master of Business Administration with a focus on economics. I chose Mr. Hers as the subject for my interview for 3 reasons. 1, he is in a major leadership position with direct reports in the double digits and holds fiduciary responsibilities for a corporation that has been publicly traded for the majority of his tenure. 2, Blue Green is a local organization, having been headquartered in Boca Raton for over 20 years, a very short drive from the FAU main Boca campus. And 3, he is my father, which made the logistics of a half-hour interview relatively simple to schedule. The purpose of this presentation is to provide my own analysis of the subject's personal leadership style and how it compares and contrasts with various concepts covered in this course. Please go to the next slide. Interview transcription. The interview was about 20 minutes in length, which covered all of the main topics outlined in the rubric. And during the course of the interview, I attempted to ask questions and get responses that would give me a better handle on Mr. Hers' leadership philosophy, as well as his leadership approach and his leadership skills. The full transcript is available in the accompanying paper. It was about 7 pages long, and it has been slightly modified to read easier, as spoken word often can be a little less engaging when written. Please go to the next slide. Interview analysis, leadership philosophy. Leadership is defined in the text as a process whereby an individual influences a group of individuals to achieve a common goal. The process implies that leaders affect those under them, and that they in turn affect the leaders. Mr. Hers gave many great examples during the interview about how he tries to affect others and how they and the situations he's faced in over 30 years as a business leader have affected his philosophy, his approach, and his skills. Beginning with philosophy, Mr. Hers prefers that his direct reports operate as autonomously as possible, which I assume most leaders would prefer. But he does understand the need for motivation and for providing a strong leadership presence. After careful consideration and consulting the text, I believe that his leadership philosophy and style would most closely resemble the team management style of leadership, which falls on 9.9 on the leadership index, on the leadership style index. The team management style of leadership describes any leader who holds both employee satisfaction and task accomplishment high among their priorities. Leaders who employ this style believe that great accomplishments come from committed people, and that employees who understand and appreciate the stake they hold in the organization can, in turn, appreciate the interdependence that they share with their colleagues and with their leaders. This, in turn, should lead to high participation, teamwork, respect, and trust within the organization as a whole. I came to the conclusion that Mr. Hers most closely resembled a team management style of leadership after analyzing his response to the question, what is the best way to get others to do what you want them to do? Mr. Herz believes in a holistic motivational style, understanding that not everyone responds to the same motivational stimuli. He takes this concept a step further, stating that different people may be more suited to different positions based on their motivational preferences. For example, he believes that those who are more motivated by salary may be more suited for a commission-based role, while those who are more motivated by praise or for being noticed for excellent work may not be as high performing in those numbers-based fields. Mr. Herz also states that he makes a strong effort to make sure that all of his employees know that he values their work and that he cares about them as people outside of their work. Please go to the next slide. Leadership approach. Mr. Herz practices several factors of transformational leadership as well as transactional leadership. Though he does not explicitly state it in the interview, I believe Mr. Herz encourages intellectual stimulation in his employees. Intellectual stimulation in his employees. I inferred this from his response to the question, what do you find most admirable in people, and why are those things so important to you? He said that he found it admirable when people took pride in their work, when they were creative, and when they thought outside of the box. This dovetails nicely with intellectual stimulation, which occurs when leaders challenge their followers to be innovative and to challenge their own beliefs about how to do things. Mr. Herz also engages in individualized consideration. This is illustrated by the analysis in 3.1, but it is also in response, was also inferred from his response to what has been the worst experience you've had when leading a team, and what did you learn from it. In this situation, Mr. Herz had to lead people in what was essentially a sinking ship scenario. Mr. Herz said that the biggest thing he learned from that experience was that what goes on in people's personal lives can greatly affect their work, and that you must be attuned to that. This is a classic example of individualized consideration, where managers provide a supportive environment for and listen to the needs of the individual. Mr. Herz does also show some tendencies to practice factors that are more aligned with transactional leadership at times. I inferred this from his response to the question, what angers or annoys you, and how do you deal with that when it happens? Mr. Herz allowed that when an employee does not follow through on a promise, whether it is a big promise or a little promise, he will discipline them. This is a form of management by exception, where a leader gives corrective criticism, negative feedback, and negative reinforcement to employees who give poor work or poor performance. By the same token, Mr. Herz will sometimes practice contingent reward, as he believes that commission-based pay is a good motivator for some employees, and that high praise should be reserved for the conclusion and submission of good work. Please go to the next slide. Leadership skills. I believe Mr. Herz possesses high competencies in all three major leadership skills. Mr. Herz clearly has technical skill in his field, as evidenced by his advanced education, as well as his progressive advancement in his field in 2 different organizations. Mr. Herz also demonstrates human skill, as has been analyzed in 3.2. And during the course of the interview, Mr. Herz demonstrated his proficiency in conceptual skill, dealing with abstract problems or ideas. He showed his willingness to continuously educate himself by studying the work of successful business leaders like Jack Welch and Gordon Bethune. Mr. Herz's career experiences have had a major impact on his leadership characteristics as well as his competencies. Mr. Herz touched on how he had to learn to adapt to the changing variables around him at a young age, moving from Philadelphia to Miami. He experienced the failure of a business early in his career and the challenges that came with the credit crisis in 2008. In the first experience, he had been promoted several times over a 10-year career to Vice President of Consumer Lending, only to have the company fail. And he had to deal with how that affected not only his own family, but the families of those who worked under him. In the credit crisis of 2008, he experienced obviously the credit crisis, which led to liquidity issues within his own company, and he had to think abstractly and think outside the box in ways to keep his company solvent. These experiences shaped Mr. Herz's skill in solving all these complex problems, motivating employees in a worst-case scenario, directing financial operations in a time of crisis. Please go on to the next slide. Conclusion. Mr. Herz's career experiences have shaped his individual attributes and competencies, which, coupled with his ability to adapt to a changing environmental pressure, have guided him to be an effective business leader. He practices a wide variety of effective leadership strategies covered in this course and understands the importance of employee motivation and morale. I hope that this interview and the analysis that I've provided will be as rewarding and informative for my classmates as it was for myself. Thank you for taking the time to view this video and PowerPoint. Thank you very much.